Have you ever wondered why, at certain moments in life, only music seems to understand what you're feeling? Why certain melodies can touch wounds you didn't even know existed? Or why a simple chord can, in seconds, bring back memories you thought were forgotten? Perhaps, as suggested by German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, this happens because music isn't just another art form, it's the direct expression of the very essence of reality. Before proceeding, if you're seeking to understand the profound relationship between music and our existence, this video was made for you. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support is what allows us to continue bringing reflections like this one. Western philosophy has always struggled with the limits of language. We try to define the indefinable, explain the inexplicable, give form to the formless. And yet, when Beethoven composed his last string quartets while completely deaf, or when Bach structured his mathematical and divine fugues, something beyond words was communicated, something that touches directly the essence of who we are. For Schopenhauer, who lived between 1788 and 1860, the world was divided into two aspects: representation, everything we perceive through our senses, and will, the blind, irrational, and insatiable force that underlies everything. This will, according to him, is the source of all human suffering. We want, desire, crave incessantly, and this is the root of our existential pain. While most arts merely reproduce the world of representations, music, unique among all, is the direct expression of this will. It's not a copy of something in the world, it's the voice of the metaphysical substrate of reality itself. Music, wrote Schopenhauer, is such an immediate objectification and copy of the whole will, as the world itself is. Think of that moment when you're alone, perhaps driving at night, and a song comes on the radio. Suddenly, something happens, a sensation that those sounds are speaking directly to your soul, translating emotions you've never been able to name. It's not just a coincidence. For Schopenhauer, in that moment, you're having a direct glimpse of the universal will, of the true nature of existence. The most fascinating aspect of Schopenhauer's musical theory is the value he attributes not just to the notes, but to the silences between them. Because it's in this void, in this pause, that the greatest emotional impact often resides. As in Beethoven's famous Moonlight Sonata, it's not just the melancholy of the notes that pierces us, but the moments of suspension between them, where our spirit is momentarily suspended over the abyss of being. Think of the songs that have moved you most in life. Probably it wasn't the technical complexity that touched you, but rather how those sounds seem to perfectly translate an internal state that you perhaps didn't even know how to express. As if the composer had looked directly into your soul and transformed that glimpse into sound waves. It's in this power that the deepest paradox of music resides. According to Schopenhauer, it puts us in contact with the will, the source of all suffering, but in doing so, it momentarily offers us an escape from that same suffering. During those minutes when we are truly immersed in music, our individual consciousness dissolves, and we become pure contemplation, freed from the chains of desire. Look at the accounts of people who have experienced profound moments with music. Many describe a sensation of ego dissolution, of connection with something greater. A terminal patient finds comfort in Bach. A trauma survivor reconnects with their emotions through Chopin. A person in mourning finds expression for their pain in Gorecki's compositions. It's no coincidence that music therapy has become such a powerful therapeutic tool. Music accesses layers of our psyche that words cannot reach. There's a fascinating story about Schopenhauer himself. Despite his philosophical pessimism, he believed we live in the worst of all possible worlds. He played the flute daily. Every late afternoon, in his meticulous routine, he reserved time for this ritual. It seems contradictory that a man who saw existence as essentially suffering would find so much satisfaction in music. But there's no contradiction. Music was, for him, the only window beyond the veil of illusion, the only glimpse of possible transcendence. If we observe carefully, will notice that music possesses a universality that no other language can achieve. A person may not understand German, but can be deeply touched by a Wagner opera. Someone might be completely unfamiliar with Indian culture, but be moved by a raga played on a sitar. This happens because, as Schopenhauer suggested, music doesn't speak of particular phenomena, but of the universal essence behind them. Let's do a small mental exercise. Close your eyes for a moment, unless you're driving, of course, and think of the last time a song made you cry. Try to recall not just the melody, but the physical sensation it provoked. That knot in your throat, that pressure in your chest, that feeling of something very old and very deep being touched within you. If we analyze it well, we'll realize that we weren't just reacting to a combination of sound frequencies, we were having a metaphysical experience, an encounter with what Schopenhauer would call the will. It's important to understand that, for Schopenhauer, music isn't just a form of escapism or entertainment. It's epistemologically significant. It reveals truths about reality that no philosophical treatise could articulate. Music, he wrote, expresses the quintessence of life and its events, never these themselves. In other words, while philosophy tries to explain life through concepts, music delivers its essence directly to us. This perspective explains why words often seem inadequate to describe a profound musical experience. When someone asks us, "How was the concert?" we often find ourselves stammering, resorting to imprecise metaphors, or simply saying, "You had to be there." It's not a defect in our descriptive capacity, it's that we're trying to translate into concepts something that exists fundamentally beyond them. Perhaps the clearest example of this transcendence is in the works of composers like Bach or Mozart. There's precise mathematics in their compositions, an almost architectural structure. And yet, the effect goes far beyond any intellectual appreciation of this structure. As listeners, we're transported to a realm where time seems to suspend, where individuality temporarily dissolves. For Schopenhauer, this occurs because we're momentarily free from the prison of will, contemplating it from outside. As spectators, this is the moment where I ask you to reflect on the role of music in your own life. If this video is resonating with you, share it with someone who also finds in music a refuge from the storms of existence. Your comment about a transformative musical experience might inspire others to rediscover this potential of sound art. What makes Schopenhauer's vision of music so revolutionary is that it inverts the traditional hierarchy of arts. Since Plato, Western philosophy tended to value visual and literary arts above music, precisely because these presented more clearly defined ideas. Schopenhauer, however, places music at the apex precisely because it transcends the realm of ideas. It doesn't represent, it presents. It doesn't describe pain, it is the voice of pain itself. This perspective helps us understand why certain types of instrumental music, without lyrics, without explicit narrative, can affect us so deeply. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Mozart's Requiem, Bach's Goldberg Variations, these works don't need to tell us stories with words to bring us to tears. They speak directly to our metaphysical essence, bypassing the barriers of language and reason. Schopenhauer believed that this unique power of music explains why it's present in all known human cultures. It's not a luxury or a frivolity, it's an ontological necessity, a way to reconnect with the totality of being. When an indigenous person from the Amazon plays their ritual instrument, when a Tibetan monk intones their chants, when a teenager in the suburbs creates beats on their computer, all are, in their way, seeking this direct connection with the fabric of reality. But there's an even more intriguing aspect of Schopenhauer's musical theory that's rarely discussed. The idea that different types of music correspond to different manifestations of the will. The deep bass represents the most basic forms of nature, minerals, rocks, fundamental forces. The intermediate harmonies represent the plant and animal kingdoms. The main melody represents human consciousness, with its aspirations and sufferings. This conception offers us a new way to listen to music. The next time you hear a symphony, try to perceive how these different elements interact, how the bass provides the foundation upon which the higher melodies can dance. It's a sonorous representation of the very structure of reality. According to Schopenhauer, the most fascinating thing is that today, more than 150 years after Schopenhauer's death, neuroscience is beginning to confirm some of his intuitions. MRI studies show that music activates brain regions associated with pleasure, memory, and emotions in a much more direct and immediate way than other art forms. Music literally speaks to our brain in a unique way, bypassing many layers of cognitive processing. This explains why people with certain forms of dementia, who have lost much of their memories and linguistic capacities, still respond emotionally to music. Or why patients in a coma may show brain activity when exposed to familiar songs. Music seems to access more fundamental layers of our being, precisely as Schopenhauer suggested. But the most deeply comforting aspect of Schopenhauer's musical philosophy is in its implication for our existential solitude. If music is truly the voice of the universal will, then when we are touched by a melody, we aren't just having a subjective aesthetic experience, we're connecting with the same fundamental force that animates all existence. In that moment, we are no longer alone. Perhaps that's why so many people report feeling a profound connection at concerts or music festivals. It's not just the social aspect of the event, it's that everyone is, simultaneously, entering into communion with the same metaphysical reality. The barriers between individual selves temporarily dissolve. There's a moving story about composer Olivier Messiaen, who wrote his Quartet for the End of Time while imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. With deteriorated instruments and in inhuman conditions, he and 3 other prisoners presented the work to inmates and guards. Years later, Messiaen recalled how, during that performance, the divisions between prisoners and guards seemed to momentarily disappear, all were united by the music. In the most extreme situation of dehumanization, music briefly restored a sense of shared humanity. If you followed along this far, know that we're exploring together one of the deepest territories of human experience. If this content is expanding your perception of music, show your support with your like and subscription. Your participation helps us continue producing reflections that go beyond the superficial. A particular aspect of Schopenhauer's theory that deserves our attention is his view of silence in music. For him, pauses aren't simply the absence of sound, they're moments where the will withdraws, moments of suspension of becoming. John Cage, with his famous piece, 4 feet 33 inches, 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, took this idea to the extreme, inviting listeners to perceive that even silence is filled with sounds, the beating of hearts, breathing, the soft hum of the world. This is a crucial point. The silence between notes isn't a meaningless void. It's a space of possibility, a moment where music doesn't explicitly state, but suggests. It's in this space that we often find the deepest revelations. As in the famous quote attributed to Mozart, the music is not in the notes, but in the silence between them. Think of the moments of suspension in pieces like Samuel Barber's Adagio, or Debussy's Clair de Lune, those instants where a note fades and we're not yet presented with the next. In that brief vacuum, something happens, something that can't be notated in the score, something that exists only in the living experience of music. For Schopenhauer, these moments are direct glimpses of the metaphysical abyss that sustains all existence. It's interesting to note how different musical traditions treat silence. In Western classical music, silence is generally meticulously notated and precisely executed. In jazz music, silence is a space of potential improvisation. In classical Indian music, silence, known as karvai, is a moment of deliberate tension, a space where the raga, the melodic structure, breathes before continuing its journey. In all these traditions, silence isn't an absence, but a presence. Perhaps the most significant of all, this view of silence offers us a profound lesson. Sometimes, what isn't said carries more meaning than what is explicitly stated. As in the famous story of the Zen master who, when questioned about the nature of Zen, simply raised a flower. Silence can be more eloquent than 1,000 words, and music, with its dance between sound and silence, teaches us this fundamental truth. But there's yet another dimension of Schopenhauer's musical theory that deserves our attention, his conception of music as consoling. Paradoxically, by putting us in direct contact with the will, the source of all suffering, music offers us temporary relief from that same suffering. This happens because, during the profound musical experience, we become pure subjects of knowledge, momentarily freed from the desires and cravings that normally torment us. That's why so many people turn to music in moments of extreme pain. Grief, separation, loss, illness, all these experiences often leave us without words, unable to articulate the internal turmoil. Music offers not just expression for this turmoil, but also a path beyond it. I remember a moving story about a man who lost his wife after 50 years of marriage. In the weeks following her death, he found himself unable to cry, trapped in a paralyzing state of emotional shock. It was only when, by chance, he heard on the radio a song they used to dance to together, that the tears finally came. The music awakened not just the pain of loss, but also the beauty of what had been lived, an emotional totality that words couldn't encompass. This is the dual power of music. It confronts us with the essential truth of our condition, the suffering inherent in existence, but also offers us moments of transcendence from this suffering. It's not an illusory escape, but a temporary reconciliation with the true nature of reality. Schopenhauer himself, despite his philosophical pessimism, found in composers like Mozart and Rossini a source of profound consolation. For him, these musical geniuses had achieved the near impossible, translating into sounds the very essence of existence, with all its beauty and terror. In doing so, they allowed listeners a glimpse of the in itself of the world, of the ultimate reality beyond appearances. What makes this perspective so singular is that it offers us a way to embrace both the beauty and pain of existence. Music doesn't promise false hopes or cheap consolations, it puts us in direct contact with the fundamental truth of being. And yet, in this confrontation, there's a strange form of consolation, a recognition that our individual pain is part of something larger, something universal. That's why, in some spiritual traditions, music is seen as a form of prayer. When words fail, when concepts prove inadequate, music remains as a bridge between the finite and the infinite, between the individual and the universal. If you feel these reflections resonate with your own experience, consider sharing this video. The algorithm values your interaction, and your support helps deeper content reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to receive more reflections like this. For Schopenhauer, there's an almost mystical aspect to music. It allows us to experience the world in a non-conceptual, pre-reflective way. While other forms of knowledge offer us representations of reality, music puts us in direct contact with that reality. It's a form of knowledge through immediate experience, not through the mediation of concepts. This explains why so many mystics and contemplative traditions turn to music as part of their practices. The Sufis with their daikar, Christians with their Gregorian chants, Hindus with their bhajans, all discover that music can take consciousness to states that transcend the ordinary limits of the self. Nietzsche, who was initially deeply influenced by Schopenhauer, expanded this vision in his first work, The Birth of Tragedy. For the young Nietzsche, music was the expression of what he called the Dionysian spirit, the principle of dissolution of boundaries, of intoxication, of communion with the primordial forces of life. In contrast with the Apollonian spirit, the principle of individuality, form, measure, Dionysian music allows us to momentarily experience the dissolution of the ego, union with something greater than ourselves. This intuition seems to be confirmed by contemporary studies on the neurological effects of music. Research shows that, during intense musical experiences, areas of the brain associated with the sense of individuality and self-consciousness may show reduced activity, while areas associated with deep emotions and sensory processing show greater activation. In other words, music literally dissolves, temporarily, the boundaries of the self. Perhaps that's why so many people describe profound musical experiences as transcendent or out of body. It's not just a poetic metaphor, it's a phenomenologically precise description of how music can alter our conscious experience, allowing us to feel, if only briefly, a connection with something that goes beyond the limits of our personal identity. This capacity of music to connect us with the universal through the particular is especially evident in pieces like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. In the famous final choral movement, with the Ode to Joy, Beethoven creates an experience that is simultaneously personal and universal, intimate and cosmic. For Schopenhauer, this represents the unique power of music to express the microcosm and macrocosm simultaneously, our subjective experience and the totality of existence. It's interesting to note how different cultures, throughout history, have intuited this transcendent power of music. For the Pythagoreans of ancient Greece, music was the sensible expression of the mathematical harmony that underlies the entire universe, the music of the spheres. For the ancient Chinese, each musical note corresponded to a fundamental cosmological principle. In the Hindu tradition, the primordial sound, Om, is considered the original vibration from which the entire universe emerged. All these traditions, in different ways, recognized what Schopenhauer articulated philosophically: music isn't just one of the arts, it occupies a unique place in our experience of reality, serving as a bridge between the visible and the invisible, the sayable and the unsayable. And perhaps that's why, even in our digital and hyper-connected era, music continues to exert its mysterious power over us. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, where everything needs to be explained, categorized, analyzed, music remains as a realm of accessible mystery. It reminds us that there are dimensions of existence that escape the network of concepts with which we try to capture reality. For Schopenhauer, that is precisely the greatness of music. It offers us not explanations, but revelations, not concepts, but direct experiences of the essence of the world. And in these revelations, in these moments when a melody touches us deeply, we find not just aesthetic beauty, but metaphysical truth. If you felt that this reflection touched something deep in you, if you recognized in your own experience with music what Schopenhauer described philosophically, consider sharing this video. Your support is essential for us to continue producing content that goes beyond the superficial and invites contemplation. To conclude, I'd like to leave a final reflection: the next time a piece of music touches you deeply, when a melody makes you cry for no apparent reason, or when a rhythm makes you feel connected to something greater than yourself, remember that, according to Schopenhauer, you aren't just having an aesthetic experience, you're having a direct glimpse of the true nature of reality. In that moment, the veil of illusion briefly lifts, and you contemplate, if only for an instant, the abyss from which all forms emerged. As the poet Rilke once said, music, breathing of statues. Perhaps, silence of paintings. You, language where languages end. In the pauses between notes, in the silence that frames sound, perhaps we can hear what words will never be able to say, the whisper of existence itself. What do you think? What music has revealed truths to you that no philosophy could articulate? Share your experience in the comments. And if this content expanded your perspective, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next video.